A warning. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered a substitute for legal advice. And if you have a question or wish to act upon the information in this podcast, we recommend you consult an attorney in your particular state. Welcome back to Punk Law 101. I'm Walter. We'll be joined shortly by Mr. Rinaldi in a minute, my co-host. And just on today's episode, we're going to be talking about a couple of Supreme Court cases, primarily the DACA case and then another case dealing with asylum-seekers in America. And then after that, we're going to talk about the two proposed police reform bills, one by the Republicans in the Senate and one by the Democrats in the House of Representatives. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Thank you. Welcome back onto the show. My co-host, John Rinaldi, everybody. And then, yeah, there we go. I don't know.
Yeah,
so,
whatever. We're not one for made for big intros. You know who we are by now.
Yeah. Just so that way we had like some kind of like rolling intro thing. I don't know. Anyway, so let's talk about the Tulsa rally first, and we'll get into
that's a good
court
subject.
cases and also the Republicans' proposed bill and the Democrats' proposed bill. But yeah, the Tulsa rally, he's like, "Oh, I'm getting millions and millions of people showing up, who want to show up," and then like they couldn't even fill a third of the stadium.
There are several things about this that I love. One was like, when you had millions upon millions of people saying they wanted to go to your rally in Oklahoma, you didn't stop and think like, are there even that many people in the area who those numbers didn't look weird to you? Because I would have been suspicious of like those numbers. Like that can't be right. Something.
Well, what was it? The Wiggles like filled out that stadium better.
Okay, I'm gonna put it out there. I'm willing to bet the Wiggles have a higher approval rating than Donald Trump right now. Like across all groups, I'm willing to bet. You know what? Someone should poll them head to head. I will put money on the Wiggles coming out. I'm gonna say 8 to 10.
Wiggles 2020, man.
8 to 10 points ahead. I'm very certain of that. But yeah, like you should have known better. You should have known that there was something wrong with those numbers.
And did you hear like one of the major reasons why they were like overestimating the people?
Well, yeah, of course.
It was like the TikTok stars and
yes.
K-pop fans were spamming them.
That's the other thing I love. It's like,
you got outsmarted by a bunch of kids on TikTok.
I mean, frankly, I think the Zoomers are smarter than they get credit for anyway. I don't know. I wasn't surprised.
Outside of that one thing where they were eating Tide Pods, like
I don't think anyone was really
eating
Tide Pods. Like,
that's one of my favorite jokes though that I used to do is like, yeah, like we had the ice bucket challenge, you guys had Tide Pods. Like, well, we're all for causes and stuff like that. Ours was for ALS, yours was for population control.
I mean, it was funny though.
Oh, I loved it.
I'm not one to deconstruct the joke, but like they do kind of look like fruit snacks. And I get the joke. I don't think it was the joke that was bad. It was I think people didn't let it die.
Yeah.
Like it stuck around too long. But like that tends to happen when old people catch on to things. Like it was funny. Now let it die.
That's why Facebook's been like ruined.
Oh, geez, yes, Facebook is basically boomer book at this point. I don't give a fuck about Facebook anymore.
But yeah, no, they actually, I like when I first went on TikTok for like the first time in like a year, and I checked it out. I was like, oh wow, like these kids, like, you know, like I don't know, they kind of know what they want to do. They kind of had an idea. I don't know, and then all of a sudden it kind of started getting a little ruined by all the old people running into that.
I'm making a pledge right now that when I'm old, I'm just gonna like not do new things. I'm just not gonna ruin things for people. Like it doesn't matter how cool of an old person I end up being. Just my being there will ruin it. That is my gift to future generations. I will accept my place.
But yeah, that Trump rally was kind of funny. But
yeah, it's pretty bad. You have a fucking stadium that holds like 19,000. You got like
They were trying to
6,
blame Black Lives Matter on it.
which doesn't really track.
No, not at all. It doesn't. Like it had nothing to do with it. There were Black Lives Matter people there, but they weren't anywhere near the entrances or whatever. And there wasn't like it wasn't enough of a thing. Like, and also there was no rioting. There were no threats.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I'm kind of at the point where I think like Trump's just gonna keep digging himself a hole, and like if that's what he wants to do, like you do you, buddy.
well, the funny thing was that they were like, well, the big thing that we got out of it were all the phone numbers, right? Like
Except
that's
most of
and
them
it's
are
like,
probably fake.
yeah, most of them are probably not don't give a fuck about you, Trump. They
That
don't
data
like
set
you.
is almost certainly useless.
So now you got to figure out which of those numbers are actually useful,
I don't
which
even know
probably
that you
none of them
can do
are.
that.
I guess you figure out which ones actually showed up.
That's probably easier said than done. Sifting through that data set is probably going to be horrible, and like I feel bad for whatever idiot intern that has to do that.
So let's get on to these Supreme Court cases, right? I got the DACA case up first. I think it seems like the so DACA was Department of Homeland Security versus Regents of University Cal. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up first, because it kind of relates back to what we did on the last Supreme Court episode, where we were talking a bit about the LGBTQ employment case,
Yeah.
and a little bit of
Don't
what we
say, don't
talked
mind me.
about.
I'm closing my windows. It is starting to storm. Okay.
Well, what we had talked about the last time was that how that case might affect the recent Trump administration changes to LGBT under the new health.
Yeah, like those regulation changes he made are probably going to get thrown out in the relatively near future.
Yeah, well, especially because of this DACA case, which basically said, yeah, they suck at administrative law. Like that's basically the crux of this DACA case was that they basically said that it was arbitrary and capricious the
I
decision
was
to
going to
rescind
say,
the
admin law is what I do for a living. I'm very well aware of the arbitrary and capricious standard.
yeah. Apparently, Trump's administration sucks at it, and that was his basic.
That is not surprising in the least.
Um, and it's pretty because arbitrary and capricious standard is actually not like it's not a hard standard to overcome, and in
I
fact,
know, like it's you really have to fuck up.
and somehow they pulled it off. In fact, Roberts basically gives them an outline on how to do it if they were to like I think we might have talked about this on one of the other cases, but like basically he gives them an outline on how how they could have gotten this done correctly. But the problem is now you don't have enough time. Like you don't have the process.
You can't do it.
Like you can, but the problem is you're coming up on election, like on a re-election campaign, and that's going to be very unpopular. Just
Yeah,
to go ahead
I
and try to
really
do that
don't.
again.
I truly do not understand why he's trying so hard to do this when like there is Republican support for Dreamers. I really don't get it. Like I get it's probably like his base is who he's really doing this for, but
Well,
I
if there
don't
was
know
real
that that's
support for
worth it.
Dreamers, they could go ahead and try and pass a law and make them look even. But again, that's going to make them look worse even.
Yeah, it's I don't know. Like fuck it, whatever. He wants to do stupid shit, let him do stupid shit.
But yeah, basically Roberts was like, "No, you can't do this. This you suck at admin law," and now the Dreamers get to stay. And I thought it was an interesting case because again, it kind of goes back to like I think some of those rules are probably going to thrown out with the health regulations that they had changed with the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah.
It was funny because everybody treated this like it was a big slap in the face to Trump.
I mean, it kind of was, but
This one was more of a slap in the face than I think the other one was, like the LGBT employment discrimination case. Like I felt
yeah,
like this was a bigger slap in the face to Trump.
I agree, but it's also like not as. I mean, I shouldn't say it's not as big a deal. It is. It's just like it's not currently in like the national thought in my head. Like I feel people are talking a lot more about LGBT rights right now than like Dreamers. Like
Well, also because it's Pride Month, and that affected it a
Yeah,
little bit.
I'm not saying either one is more important than the other. Just like one of them is a bit more conspicuous at the moment, and I'm sure that ebbs and flows and whatnot.
Yeah, and I also think because I think general support for gay people nowadays is like in the current, like I think amongst people is generally up. Like I think a lot more people support gay people than they necessarily even do like again immigration and immigrants.
Yeah, I mean, immigration is still like a wedge issue, but like gay rights is kind of said and done at this point. Like, well, you really don't see too many people making the argument that it's like you just can't.
The
Like
only
in
one that
polite society, you just can't.
I think the only one I hear about anymore, the only one that I still see as maybe a continuing legal battle is gay adoption. Is
I guess. I mean,
that might still continue being a fight, and that's one of the things that I don't think you're going to get a Supreme Court opinion about. That's one of those things that the states have to kind of come around on.
probably.
But yeah, I do think that it was interesting that people and Trump took it like a personal slap. Like he had posted something on
Yeah,
Twitter.
he was saying like he's gonna like get new Supreme Court justices. Like you can't do that. They kind of have to die. You
Well,
can't.
no, you can. You could pack the court and you could add more judges than just 9. Like there's no real technical limit.
That's such a bad idea. That will backfire.
Oh, it absolutely will, because then Democrats will do it the
Yep,
next
and
time
then
around.
they'll be like, oh, if you can do it, I can do it too. Like that will backfire. That's
I mean, people were already suggesting that for when Democrats take over.
Here's my take on this. And again, this is based off of just pure speculation. I don't think Mitch McConnell would let him do that.
To pack the court.
That the Senate just would refuse to. Yeah, I don't think they'd let him do it.
I don't know about that. I think Mitch McConnell's basically bent over for Trump anytime he can. So I don't know if
Yeah, but I think Mitch McConnell is smart enough to know this will fuck them over in the future.
everything.
The moment that you open that door, well, okay, if you can pack the courts, so can I. Let's have 50 Supreme Court justices. Who gives a fuck?
Well,
I
eventually, yeah,
truly
I get that.
I do not think he wants that to happen. And I'm willing to bet that like there was a talk about it and McConnell was like, no.
This is also probably why, like when we talked about before with Roberts having a very he was very cautious about what that Supreme Court's going to do going into the future, and even like some of the cases they take up, some of the cases like I don't think Roe v. Wade gets overturned with this court.
Nope. I don't think
Now, as
so
long as
either.
Roberts is there, and because I think the risk is that he does not want to delegitimize the standing of the Supreme Court. He does not want all of a sudden there to be 15 judges on the Supreme Court. Now, granted, I've never really understood the arching burden of like, oh well, why do we have 9 versus 15? I don't know.
Why not 7 or 3?
We've had 7 before, didn't we?
I know. But I'm just like saying it's an arbitrary number.
Yeah, so and the number can change still.
Oh yeah, you can do whatever the fuck you want.
So Trump didn't make it sound like he was going to pack the court. He made it sound like he was getting a new list of judges because he thought, given what Gorsuch did in the Bostock opinion,
but he's getting the thing from the same place where he got Gorsuch's name from anyway. It's all the Federalist Society. It's like what, you're going to go back to the place where you got him from?
Exactly.
Like, okay, whatever. Like, and frankly, had you done your research on Gorsuch, you would have known that he was likely to go that way on an LGBT case anyway. Because prior to becoming a Supreme Court justice, he had ruled similarly on cases in the DC Circuit. So, like, this is kind of a self-own. You should have known this. This is your fault.
Don't disagree. Do not disagree. Any final thoughts on this case, or?
No, I mean it's.
I think there's a little bit more to be talked about with the Homeland Security versus
it's
case.
It's like Dreamers. You can't end DACA. Get fucked, Trump. That's essentially the substance.
He can't do it right now. If he gets reelected, he might be able to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's move on to Thurgood. This is the one that's everybody was talking about this week. That with the hang on a sec. Whether asylum seekers can file, basically, it was a very narrow case, but this had to do with asylum seekers being able to file habeas corpus petitions.
Yeah, people were not happy about this decision.
And because what happened is that the under the 1996 Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act, they create an expedited removal that allows immigration officials to make immediate decisions to deport a person without a hearing if the person is apprehended within 100 miles of the border, and if they cannot prove that they have lived in the country for more than 2 weeks. So it's a weird thing. It's a weird law. It's basically like we're getting rid of any kind of real due process if we can find you within 100 miles of the border, which basically everybody, if you are here illegally, don't stay within 100 miles of the U.S. border.
You'd be surprised, like, how many places are within 100 miles of a U.S. border.
That's true too. That's true.
Wait,
Because technically,
does the
move
law
to Kansas.
specify? Does the law specify that you have to be 100 miles from the border that they suspect you came over? Or
No.
like if you move to Montana, you're fucked. Yeah.
You got to move directly into the middle of the United States.
Where is the exact center of the United States?
Like you have to go to Colorado.
Wait, I'm gonna Google what town is like central most in the United States.
But yeah,
This
so
is my little side thing. We can keep going.
yeah, they did provide exceptions to this expedited removal, one of which involves asylum seekers. And if a non-citizen expresses a fear of prosecution, the officer must refer them to an asylum officer who conducts what is known as a credible fear interview. If the asylum officer finds a significant possibility that the applicant's asylum claim would succeed, the applicant is given a full immigration hearing. So basically what happens is when you're seeking asylum from a country, it's like, I'm afraid to go back there. I've seen people do this with and it's funny, these two cases are very related, right? DACA, and now you're talking about asylum seekers. And everybody was giving Ginsburg such a hard time about this case because she joined in with the majority.
Yep. Like I said, people were not happy about this one.
Yeah. And I saw a lot of things posted on Twitter that I thought were maybe a little unfair. Because again, this is a very limited case.
Yeah, but I mean, regular people don't know that.
I know. Well, no, I saw their attorneys talk about this online too.
Well, okay. In fairness, most attorneys are not immigration attorneys, and honestly, don't know enough about this to really have an opinion.
Or probably didn't just know that it's about asylum seekers and don't know necessarily what the actual, like, they didn't look at the holding necessarily.
Yeah, like,
so
attorneys don't know everything.
Basically what happened here is, in this case, Thurgood was tried to file a habeas corpus petition. He was from Sri Lanka. He part of an ethnic minority called the Tamil. He was apprehended within 25 feet of the U.S. border. He asked for asylum because he feared persecution in his home country because he had been like outspoken against the political party there. He's been beaten and kidnapped while he lived there. After a credible fear interview, the asylum officer found that there was no significant possibility that he would qualify for asylum in a full hearing. An immigration judge upheld the decision after a cursory review. By the way, there's a whole big problem with our own immigration process that just even looking at this and going beyond this, that
there's a list of problems with the immigration
process.
So
people who are upset about this would probably be more upset about just the fact that the process is broken in general, and the fact that we have such an expedited review process. He filed a habeas petition alleging that the asylum officer had erred in not considering the relevant facts about identity and motives of his attackers, who he explained were government officials, and that the expedited asylum procedure violated its due process because he did not receive adequate safeguards, such as a competent translator and an opportunity to present country condition reports. So one of the things that they were arguing was that he should have been allowed to file a habeas corpus petition. They compared it to some previous cases and some previous acts that he before we get into that, actually, the district court denied his habeas claim because in order to review expedited removal cases, the issue has to be whether he was a citizen, whether the immigration officer had a valid removal order, or whether he was wrongfully subjected to expedited removal because he had previously been granted lawful permanent residence, refugee status, or asylum. None of those things applied. He appealed. The Ninth Circuit reversed it, holding that habeas review was available under Section 1252A(e), that it did not satisfy the constitutional suspension clause, which guarantees a right to habeas corpus absent extraordinary circumstances such as national emergency. The Supreme Court voted 7-2 to reverse this, and Alito wrote the opinion. So that'll just kind of tell you where this went.
Yeah, it's kind of all you need to know.
But okay, so some of the arguments here was that there had previously been habeas corpus for people held for immigration. One of the things that Alito makes a distinction about is that this is not your habeas corpus petition here is not like in the past when people have been able to do it, that it was is a statutory it was statutorily in there that they could file a habeas corpus petition. And let's see, there had previously been a review for about like 50 years, from like 1790 to like 1860. There was a previous like older form where they were doing this, but it was in the Immigration Act. Basically, that he was not. When you did, there was. They also compared to one of the Guantanamo Bay cases where they were able to file for immigration. They were able to file for habeas corpus, but the thing is when they were given the right to habeas corpus because they were being held. He was being deported. So they made a distinction between him being held in the country and being held and having judicial review versus, listen, we're not holding you. We're sending you back to your country. So there was it was a very narrow case. It was just whether or not he was allowed to, seek a habeas corpus petition challenging the unlawful confinement or vindicating federal rights to review legal or constitutional errors. Now, if Congress does not like this, they can go ahead and write a new law.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah, I know. But, Ginsburg got a lot of flack for this one because she voted with the majority. I thought this was kind of like, I mean, if you're going to allow for a process where there is no judicial review anyway, and that, you're saying the habeas petition is supposed to be the review process, why not just say that this current process is not valid? But I don't know. Because again, like, asylum seekers are not considered citizens, and there's a whole bunch of problems with our immigration process, basically.
Yeah.
There's too many, you're not guaranteed a lawyer. A lot of them probably need a lawyer to be doing it. And actually, we've actually, what's it called? We've kicked people out of the country who were U.S. citizens. That's why they have some of these processes. Like we were talking before with the habeas petition, one of the things you can file for is you're actually proving that you are a citizen.
Yeah. Immigration's just that issue that's never going to get fixed. Like, I know that sounds super cynical, but we've been trying to fix this for how long now? And it just never seems to get anywhere.
And again, I don't think they got the law wrong.
I was going to say same thing, like unpopular opinion. I don't actually think they're wrong. It's like, I think people have the hard time with the distinction of like when you're a judge, you're asked to put aside your political ideas and like interpret the law as it was, intended. And I do actually think that's the right outcome. I don't like it, and I would like it to change.
Well, I actually just don't get the process of why you're allowed to do the expedited review process. Like, if you're not arguing against that, I get the argument of why, like, when we're looking at the procedure that they use, the habeas petition, right? First off, it's really meant to be able to get you free from federal government constraints, not to allow you to stay in the country. So I have a bigger problem with the process that they already are going through. But the thing that they were attacking, and the thing that was the issue of this case, was not whether or not it's constitutional to have this expedited process. I think it might be unconstitutional. I personally think it is unconstitutional for this expedited process, because how do you not have they're basically, you're taking out the due process elements. Like their due process elements here are, you do an interview with an officer. Yeah, a judge kind of looks at the piece of paperwork, but you really don't get get any guarantee. Like, I don't know. I thought those are the issues I take with it.
I mean, I guess, but like, what are we depriving people of in that context?
Well, in that case, I think he has a good case for that. I think his case is he is seeking asylum, and he's using this fearful interview to say, listen, I can't go back to this country. I've seen this happen to people who were like, when there was questions about DACA that were, whether or not they were going to be able to be applicable to DACA, they couldn't go back to, like, I knew people who were from Honduras who had this issue. And like, okay, like, what if we send this person back to Honduras? They have never been to Honduras in their life. They haven't been to Honduras since they were 2 years old.
Well, like the DACA thing, I think it's a different case. Like, I think that's different.
They are,
because,
but they're related. Only because, first off, I think it's weird that we allow this rule of within 100 miles of a border.
Yeah, that's
due
weird.
process changes. That I don't like.
That is weird.
I don't get with this. That's the thing I take issue with. I mean,
to me,
when you look at the narrow holding here, I get why it came out the way it is, but I think the overall. But what were you saying? The question is what?
The question to me is, are they owed any due process at all? Like, could they just say, fuck it, no due process, even more than 100 miles away from the...
Well, you need some level of due process because you need to be able to prove they're not citizens.
Yeah, I suppose. But, like, okay, that's fine.
So you need some level of due process. I think if you're going to be a country like America that allows for people to seek asylum here, then you do need some kind of due process element, because, hey, we're allowing people to seek asylum here. There are credible arguments to this, and people do get it wrong.
I mean, yeah, but like the asylum system that we have, it's not really designed for like modern problems.
I guess.
Like that's the reason why we're like sending all these people back to Honduras, is like the criteria that we use to determine whether or not someone's being persecuted in their country. Like it often must be the case they're being persecuted by the government.
Yeah.
Not like random street thugs. And while like functionally speaking, it doesn't make much of a difference, like whether it's street gangs or police murdering people, it makes a difference for our process. And like I think that's one of the major problems. It's like, well, if you're not being oppressed by your government, we're gonna send you home. And I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying that's essentially the problem.
I agree. Yeah. I do think you need some levels of due process here, and the fact that this expedited review has that process in it, I don't know.
I agree that we should have some level of due process, but like, do they?
And maybe we should change the asylum laws. Maybe that's the.
Well, we probably should, but that's not going to happen
because it's not sexy.
No, because
I mean that's really the point, because nobody's coming. What voting population is the asylum seekers? Zero.
Wait, they don't.
They're not voters, so you're not attracting more asylum seekers to vote for you. Who are related to the asylum seekers? Maybe there's some in this country who are related to asylum seekers, unless you were making it broad enough where the asylum question becomes like, oh, we can have a massive amount of people come into this country based off the asylum clause, because if you expanded it to include not just government officials but also, like you said, street thugs.
Like asylum seekers generally don't vote, because they can't, I guess. I don't know.
Well, you would need people who are.
But to me, the real issue is immigration has been like Trump's issue.
Yeah,
it's not happening anytime soon. And I think if the Democrats win, if they win the White House, Well, the Senate still won't let it happen. And even if they win, and if they win the Senate, I'm willing to bet they have higher priorities.
That's true.
Like, yeah, I would like to see it change. I'm just not optimistic. But then again, I'm also not an immigration attorney, so don't take my word for it.
Well, it might slip in. Like we see laws change all the time that we're not paying attention to.
That's true. But I mean, like,
But you also need lobbyists. Like things change because there's a lobby, there's an effort, there's some kind of push to reform something. And with the asylum seekers, that's again, like this is a very narrow area, and you're just not getting a lot of push to go ahead and change this. Like I was saying before, like asylum seekers aren't voters. They're also not really strong lobby either.
nope.
Unless you're like Prince of Iran or something, and it
Yeah,
was the
but like,
1970s, and that guy got to seek asylum here.
yeah, but like that's different.
I don't know. I don't know how much different it is compared to the guy who's like getting sent back to Honduras, and it's like I owe debts back there, or some guy, I banged this guy's wife, and now he wants to kill me, and he's also the head of a big street gang. So
Shouldn't have
I
done
don't know
that.
why I'm creating this weird like scenario. It's like, but anyway, so yeah, those were the two cases. I did notice that there's a lot more flat. Like I remember a couple years ago, everybody was like standing Ginsburg. I think that's the thing I really want to talk about here is the sudden pushback against Ginsburg the last 2 weeks
I
because
mean, people forget she's like fucking peak level boomer at the end of the day. Like
she's
even
182 years old.
something like I don't know.
She was around when
She's ageless at this point.
she's immortal. Like she's got those immortal genes
We,
that they were
we,
talking
we really
about.
shouldn't joke about that. Actually, she's got to hold on for a few more months.
Please,
I
Ginsburg,
would.
stay alive.
I know this. I know this isn't what's gonna happen, but I would not love it because it would still be sad if, like, literally the moment that Trump is out of office, she just goes peacefully, like down to the second. Just
I think I honestly, she might live another 10 years, but I just want her to retire if we get Trump out of office. That's really the big word.
I mean, that would be the probably responsible thing to do. But I mean, I don't know.
By the way,
Whatever.
Trump is so unpopular. People like Lindsey Graham, guys who have had their seats for like 3 decades or whatever, not 3, but like 2 decades, he's like having issues like staying afloat in like South Carolina.
Yeah, well, maybe Lindsey Graham shouldn't have fucking got aboard the Trump train and stuck to his principles. Fucking idiot.
Well, I think they have blackmail on them. That's the Lindsey Graham
Who cares?
blackmail.
You're fucking old and probably gay. No one cares. If I get to be Lindsey Graham's age and I'm like in a seat of power, what? I don't care. I already did good. What the fuck you gonna do to me?
True.
Like, I don't give a shit.
Back to the Ginsburg thing, right? Because Ginsburg had like these big stands. Like I remember people were just like the notorious RBG, and I think now people are moving from her to Sotomayor.
That makes some sense, I guess.
Well, I do think Sotomayor is the much more liberal justice. I also think she's a very good writer. I think she's probably, if you have to read an opinion by her, it's probably not a bad time. Like some justices, their opinions are just not very well written. Some of them are, and she's a very well written judge. What was I gonna say? I do see a pushback now, whereas like 3 years ago, everybody was like, they even had like a movie about RBG, man.
I mean, like, I think she's still a champion of liberal causes. It's just like,
Yeah.
this is a narrow, like, people are getting mad at her about these like very technical areas of law, like fucking easements and immigration. Like,
Yeah, like whether
what do you want her to do?
whether a piece of property is considered part of the Parks Department.
Yeah, like,
she's not as liberal as we thought, man. It's like, okay, well, first, and here's the thing: there's almost always at least like we said a couple weeks ago, there's almost never a unanimous decision. By the way, we still haven't talked about that case, the one where there actually was a unanimous decision this year.
Which one was that?
The Chris Christie case, the Bridgegate case.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Like, there's almost never a unanimous decision. Like, it's almost even if like on the best cases, it's like 7-2.
Yeah,
8-1. because there's always some room for dissent, and a lot of times it's almost preferable to the judges for there to be this dissent there. Like, we already know you got a 7 vote on this. It's not, I'm going to go vote for the dissent and I get to write my own opinion on it, and I get to go ahead and kind of argue the other way, and it might create some discourse down the line.
Yeah.
So I think people underrate that. Like, it might be that Kagan and Sotomayor went to 2 on this because it's like Kagan might agree with, Sotomayor or Kagan might agree with basically how I was saying it, which I don't even think we need to get. I actually didn't read the dissent on this, unfortunately. Actually, on this, I think Sotomayor was. Let me check, because I think Sotomayor was actually in the majority for part of this. This was one of those decisions where it was like Justice Roberts for part 1, 3, and 1, 2, and 3, and except for part 4, and part 4 was Sotomayor and this person. So
yeah, like some of the things are very complicated. Like they need to
like
make a chart.
some of the judges don't agree with certain parts of what another
Yeah,
judge is saying.
they should put out a chart so like you can just put in a nice infographic who agrees with what.
Yeah,
That'd be nice. It's never gonna happen though.
so that was the asylum case. Let's move on, because now we're we've been talking about the stuff going on with Black Lives Matter and the protests, and we've talked about that, I think, for the majority of this podcast since it's been alive.
Well, it's kind of been
We came out at the same time. It was cool.
The national spotlight is like that and coronavirus.
So anyway, we're talking about the police reform bills. There's 2 bills proposed, one by the Senate Republicans, another one by the Democrats. And the Republicans have a bill that, this is the reason actually I kind of thought about this, is somebody was posting something about it, and they said that the Republicans had banned no-knock warrants, which if you heard that off the street and you heard that Republicans are banning no-knock warrants, wouldn't that make you scratch your head?
Yes, but I would believe it though.
I would not. And guess what? I was right when I didn't believe it. It has nothing. Their bill does not propose banning no-knock warrants. It does not ban nor incentivizes banning of no-knock warrants. Instead, it requires reporting of no-knock warrants and provides parameters for the reporting of no-knock warrants, including disallowing reporting for open cases. So, on the one end, okay, they're like, and a lot of what the Republicans' bill was. And we'll go into the Republicans' bill because it seems to be the more lip service, in my opinion, and doesn't really do much. The things that it does do are okay. Like, there's some things that it does. It increases the penalty for falsifying police reports. It incentivizes the banning of chokeholds, which I don't think anybody's going to do, because I think chokeholds are a weird thing that I think we over. From like 1,000-mile view up, we look at the chokeholds as if that's the major problem. And I think because like, honestly, these cops just aren't trained in how to, like, I remember I think Andrew Yang was very much for every cop requiring to have a purple belt in jiu-jitsu.
I mean, it's probably not a bad idea.
No, I think that's a great idea. I think that's something I totally agree with. I think that's what you need more training on, that if you're going to allow people to do something like that. And like, listen, you need to be able to disarm people, but keeping your knee on the back of somebody's head is
unnecessary. I mean, okay,
yes.
it depends on the context. Like if you're like dealing with like if you caught Jeffrey Dahmer, fine. Fine. If you really have to do it that way. But for like a fake 20,
by the way, since you brought up
don't
Jeffrey Dahmer, I just found this out like literally a week and a half ago. I might have known this before, but apparently there was like the Milwaukee police had like run into Jeffrey Dahmer. And then, by the way, this police officer who did this got to retire after 20 years, and has had multiple other issues. But apparently, like, they ran into Jeffrey Dahmer when he, like, one of the kids that he killed was like escaped and had like a whole.
Oh yeah, I had heard about this story.
Oh my god!
Handed him right back over. Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Somebody like reposted that recently, and then I was like, "Oh wow, that's kind of screwed up." So
I will give them the benefit of the doubt on that one. I don't fucking know.
Mm, I don't. I wasn't
I
there
don't
in the '90s,
know. Yeah,
but
yeah.
something tells me if we're having these kind of problems with cops today, they were not much better back in the '90s,
Well, that's
late
true.
'80s.
I don't know.
So I don't know if I'm going to give him much deference on this. And there's been a lot of he initially got fired, then he won his job back, and we'll get more into the
Those damn police unions.
yeah. So let's go to the proposed bill again for the Republicans. We'll go back to that. They incentivize banning chokeholds. They increase the criminal penalties for falsifying police reports. They do make lynching a federal crime. But to be honest, the lynching one's kind of weird because it's already a hate crime. Like that was one that I always thought was like, I get why they're doing this. I like that I get that they're trying to add to this. But like overall, like it's still a hate crime. It doesn't fall into the federal hate crime statutes.
Hmm.
I never understood this part of it because it was like I felt like this is more for performative reasons why they kept on trying to add this. Not that I think that it's wrong, but
I mean, it can't really hurt, I guess.
yeah, and now you're explicitly like I think the purpose of because they were trying to do an anti-lynching statute like a month ago, and Rand Paul like kind of tried railroading it, which is
Yeah, but
interesting that Rand Paul was against it. But
he's just kind of an asshole, though. Like, what are you gonna do?
I mean, to be fair, lynching is technically illegal. It's just called murder.
Yeah, but like, whatever,
But
man.
I get why. Like, listen, you want to add in the like. I guess the purpose is to be able to arrest them federally for it.
Whatever. If the feds want to get involved, I guess they can do that.
So I think that's the purpose of it. But I thought it would be under um some kind of a federal hate crime statute. But maybe that just adds to the ability for them to enforce it if that's the case. Um, the rest of it's more about funding. Those are the only things that were made illegal, or there was some kind of actual criminal liability involved. Everything else is more of use of force of data collection, incentivizing body cams, like a grant program for them. It does require law enforcement to retain records for 30 years. I thought that was actually one of the things that I thought was good. Um, Training programs in de-escalation, a commission in establishing the Black Men and Boys Commission, which is about the relationship between black men and boys and the police, the Criminal Justice Commission, law enforcement hiring and training processes, making programs to help educate both about law enforcement uh, practices and create a develop and nationally disseminated curriculum to educate program participants in the history of racism in the United States. So it's a lot of like we're trying to do studies. We're going to put some money into this, and honestly, there's not really much penalty to not do a lot of these things. They do get rid of the one thing I like is that they attack the Law Enforcement Consent Loophole Act, and they incentivized adopting it as well, which is the whoever's acting under the color of the law knowingly engages a sexual act with an individual who's been arrested and detained by that individual or is in custody by federal law enforcement shall be fined in prison not more than 15 years or both.
Hmm.
And then they also incentivize it for the states to enact that law. Basically, it makes it so that a cop can't have sex with a perpetrator who's in their custody, which this is shockingly not against the law in a lot of states.
Yeah. It's also like one of those things you're kind of sad that it's a real problem. Like,
It is a
who's doing that?
a lot, apparently.
Well, I know, but it's like it shouldn't be. That shouldn't be a thing.
So, um, yeah, I don't know. I agree with what the Democrats are saying, where it's not going far enough. I think, especially because this doesn't even include qualified immunity. It doesn't really address no-knock
That's
warrants that much.
never gonna happen at the federal level. It's just not.
I mean, it has to happen at the federal level. That's kind of
No, I mean
that's
like qualified immunity is never going to get like
passed.
taken away at the federal level. It's
Well,
not
if Democrats
going to
win,
happen.
that's the way it would happen.
Okay, yeah, maybe, but like again, I'm operating under the assumption that we've got 4 more years.
So I don't know. What do you think about the Republicans' bill on that? Like, what do you think their proposed bill?
I
You
mean,
think that's enough?
offensive about it, but like it's kind of
Well,
like it's a start, I guess.
the problem is that with the it's a start thing is that I think the reason why Democrats are holding against that is that the nothing like a lot of what it criminalizes is like the bare minimum stuff. Like it really doesn't address like major issues, and the rest of it is like funding for incentive programs and things that like if they don't want to do it, well, we're kind of screwed anyway.
Yeah, like I don't think it goes far enough, and I mean I guess it would be a decent start. But I understand why you'd hold it up because there's no reason to believe that if you called this a start that they'd actually ever do anything else.
Exactly. That well, I think that's the biggest problem with it is that there is no proof that if you did more, if you did this, there would be more. I think I agree. That's my issue with it is if you were not doing the and because everybody's going to hear it and they're going to be like, well, we didn't get qualified immunity pass, we didn't get this pass, we didn't get like so. And I think with the Democrats, it makes it an issue for the election. And I get that people are like, well, they're playing politics. Well, yeah, but politics is up this year, right?
Yeah,
This is an election.
it's
That's the name of the game.
literally, yeah, like that's the name of the game. It's an election year. What do you fucking want?
So the Democrats Justice and Policing Act they revise USC 18 USC 242, the federal criminal police misconduct statute, which the current mens rea standard for willfulness is extremely difficult to prosecute law enforcement officers under. So they want to add knowingly or reckless disregard and
reasonable.
And define a death resulting as any act which there was a substantial factor contributing to the death, which is kind of like what would be the George Floyd case.
Yeah.
They address the qualified immunity rule. The problem, courts have interpreted qualified immunity to bar individuals from recovering damages when law enforcement officers have violated their constitutional rights. The bill would modify Section 1983 to enable individuals to recover damages when law enforcement officers violate their constitutional rights. Like it would reduce it would allow them to go ahead and recover or have an easier time recovering when their constitutional rights are violated. Because like we said last time, you have to have almost an exact same case.
Which is it's so stupid because like it's kind of self-defeating in that. Well, how can something become clearly established if it's not already clearly established? Like, if the case has to then be thrown out on qualified immunity grounds, but everyone agrees that it's wrong, I mean, it can't be on the books because you threw it out. So, like, it's stupid. Like, it's hard to explain qualified immunity because it's stupid and it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And well, not only that, but qualified immunity is still a relatively new concept in sovereign immunity. Like
That's
it's
the other
only
thing too.
it's only like 50 years old.
People don't realize there's no like textual basis for it.
Well, there is. There is there is a textual basis. There is a statute for it, but
Yeah, but the statute says that government officials will be held liable for the deprivation of any rights.
Yeah.
And then the Supreme Court came around and said, we're going to add any clearly established rights to that. Like, you just interpreted that. Dude, like the statute does not say clearly established. They just kind of threw that in there because they could. And like that's kind of bullshit.
Yeah. So after that, they also wanted to do a pattern and practice investigation. So, problem: the Department of Justice and Civil Rights Division's ability to conduct pattern and practice investigations into discriminatory and unconstitutional practices has been undermined by the Trump administration. The bill that they are proposing would grant power to the U.S. Department of Justice and Civil Rights Division to conduct pattern and practice investigations and provide grants to the state attorneys to conduct and pattern practices investigation. This is one of those things, because I mentioned it last time, is that one of the things you could do is you could have the FBI investigate, and you do the DOJ goes ahead and they go into they go into some of these police precincts and they go, oh, well, you need to change X, Y, and Z. This happened in St. Louis. This happened in Ohio. And they have to come to an agreement on some changes. The thing here is that it kind of depends on who's the president a lot of the time, right? Like It happened. I think there was like 15 of them under Obama, and I think like 15 of them under about 15 of them under George Bush. There's been like 4 of them, or not. I know, not even. I don't think there's not even there's not even been a third of the amount that Obama's administration did. I think there's been like 1 or 2 opened under the current administration.
It's not surprising in the least.
Yeah. So in order to, for the FBI to do these investigations, to give them broader authority to do it, and also to allow state attorney generals to be able to do it, and give them funding to go ahead and conduct these practices, right? Conduct these investigations, because one of the good things is that state AGs have been very prominent in getting certain laws before the Supreme Court, because they have funding, right? They have state funding to do these things.
They have money. They can bankroll it.
Yeah, this is why actually a lot of antitrust cases are done by the state attorney general's office, because most people who otherwise would be able to file an antitrust claim just don't have the money to file such. So you see a lot of the time attorney general's offices in each state doing it. It depends on who's the AG, but the fact that you have 50 AGs in the country filing different cases and having different things that they are addressing, it gives you, it's one of the good things about states' rights, right? It's like one of those, like the fact that we have 50 little, biospheres of legal, development, is that you have 50 attorney generals that might pick like their thing that they want to attack and be able to attack it. The problem is they would only probably be able to do it with their own state government. So a lot of times it's like, if you're the AG in your state, yeah, you might have like we're in New Jersey, so we have Attorney General Gruhl. He already set out conducts and standards for the state police, and some states actually the Attorney General has a lot of leeway. Like New Jersey has a lot of leeway with how the state police act underneath the Attorney General. Some states don't have that. I think the AG in New York was doing a lot of the investigations for the civil rights violations during the protests in New York City. I believe it's Letitia. Is it Letitia Brown's her name?
That sounds right.
I posted
but
it.
I could also be wrong.
So I think that's important, that, like I said before, that's one of those ways of that the federal government can step in and intervene. Because one of the issues with these programs, with the federal government trying to change the law regarding police reform, is they only have, like, you and I know this as attorneys, there's only like limited ways that the federal government can step in.
Policing,
interstate commerce.
Well, policing is largely a local issue anyway, so like you can only do so much.
Yeah. So you could either, you have to either look at the necessary and proper clause, and if there's something within the Constitution to follow through with that. And the one way that they've been able to do it is through the Civil Rights Act and through the 14th Amendment. That's kind of the one way they've been able to attack police reform in the past. That's why the FBI is able to do their investigations of it. But the problem is now you need to first be investigating these police departments to begin with. And, even under Obama, we were only in to like 15 of them. We didn't break 20.
I mean, well, they can only do so much. Like look, what do you want them to do? They probably don't even have the staffing to like do it on the level that would be necessary.
I mean, they could. That's an executive order issue. It's if you felt like that's why they were able to do it with St. Louis. It's the problem is it has to be brought to your attention. It needs to be prominent.
Well, yeah.
Like, you're not investigating every police department in the country.
I don't know that you could. There's too many of them.
Yeah. So, they also brought up the independent investigation issue. The problem is state and local law enforcement agencies have historically failed to hold law enforcement officials accountable for misconduct and excessive use of force. Their bill would grant a program for state attorney generals to create an independent investigative procedure or process for law enforcement misconduct or excessive force use. That, I think, is pertinent. You need that. I don't get why this is not already a thing. We have police officers and their local DAs investigating. I mean, like, that creates a conflict of interest right there.
Because there's no political will to change it. I don't know. Like,
you're right. That really is the problem. Is that, first off, what happens? We want to go back to the police union thing where they help get people in office that help keep them feeling comfy, cozy. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's also like a weird thing where like the cops and prosecutors have to work together.
well, that's why I think
It's
like an
like,
outside body is important. I
yeah,
honestly think we should have this for the judiciary too.
yeah, there needs to be like a separate thing that handles this because like it just doesn't make sense the way that it works now.
Um, then they also wanted to add in the Law Enforcement Trust and Integrity Act, which the problem is police departments lack uniform standards to ensure adherence to best practices and community accountability. This bill would require the attorney general to create a law enforcement accredited standard or recommendation based on Obama's task force on the 21st century policing. I guess the reason why they're pointing out Obama's task force on is because I don't think Trump's had one.
It's just default. We got to use the other one.
Trump's rules on this are I'm going to ignore the problem and hope it goes away.
Yeah, it's not a good. It's not a good idea.
Create law enforcement development programs to help develop best policing practices. Republicans did this in their bill as well. Study the impact of law and rule of law or procedure allows a law enforcement officer to delay for an unreasonable or arbitrary period of amount of time to answer the questions posed by investigations of law enforcement misconduct. Enhanced funding for pattern and practice discrimination described in Section 210401 of the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act, and programs managed by the DOJ Community Relations Service. So again, they attack more of these standards in policing, and then they also do the same thing as the Republicans in they want transparency through data. A lot of times these police officers leave or are fired by one agency and they move to another jurisdiction.
Yeah, that should not be allowed. I don't quite understand how that's a thing.
So they want to do in their bill create a federal registry of all federal, state, and local law enforcement officers that compiles misconduct complaints, discipline records, termination records, and records of certification. There's one national certification that everybody uses. It's not technically, I don't think it's actually what's it called, endorsed by the federal government, but there's one national program that a lot of them use, and there's about like 40 states that use some variation of it. But but you don't know, not every state knows when that certification is going to be taken away. So again, and they also mandate that law enforcement agencies ensure that all officers are hired or certified within the state, which I think is going to be kind of standard anyway. But
yeah, that would be. I mean, that would be
you
ideal.
would hope that's already a thing.
Yeah, like it's like one of the things where like we don't already do that. Like,
yeah.
The fuck.
Well, I mean, not for nothing. There's a lot of states where the requirement to be a cop is not the same as every other state. Like some states, it might be you have a high school diploma and 50 hours, 50,
Yeah. Like it doesn't take very long. Like, okay, I mean, it doesn't take long compared to like law school to be a fucking cop. Like,
probably should.
It probably should take a little bit longer than it does, but whatever. I'm gonna say like they don't give us guns.
Right?
Most of my
mistakes. How cool would it be to be a lawyer with a gun? Like that's just like that's our jobs now. They replace all cops with lawyers.
We are officers of the court.
That is true. We are called officers of the court. Not generally in that regard. Like I don't get to bring a gun with me to court every day.
That'd be fucking great though.
Be awesome. You know what? I think that I am now pro Second Amendment. I'm just gonna go out and get a gun. I'm gonna be like, I'm gonna start arresting people. Let's do it. We're gonna make all lawyers cops.
I am so into it.
You know why it would never work? Have you seen like most of the people, like most people after they get out of law school are just like physically just destroyed?
Okay, most cops are like fat old white guys.
Yeah, after a few years. But the rookies tend to be at least in somewhat good shape.
Well, yeah, but like that doesn't last.
No, it doesn't.
So the reason why they keep shooting people in the back is because they can't fucking catch up with them. That's actually something I think there should be stricter fitness standards for cops. Like if you get fat, you're done. Like leave. I think that's reasonable.
I'm shocked that that's not already a thing.
Well, because the ones in power are the fat old guys. So like they're not gonna fucking make that a requirement.
That is true. So yeah, one of the other pieces of the legislation includes the End Racial and Religious Profiling Act. I'm shocked in 2020 we're still talking about racial profiling being a thing.
I'm not.
I thought this was like already like a moot issue, and like it continues. Like we had a guy running for president 3 months ago who advocated for it like literally a year and a half ago. Like it was not.
Yeah.
Uh, so like the problem is blacks are 3.5 times more likely to be arrested for selling drugs. In fact, the whites are just as likely to sell drugs, if not more likely. Also 2.5 times more likely to be arrested for possessing drugs, even though again, same rate as white people. And it would be, the bill would prohibit federal, state, and local law enforcement from racial, religious, discriminatory practices and create a cause of action for declaratory or injunctive relief. It would mandate law enforcement provide training on racial, religious, and discriminatory profiling. That's similar to what that part's similar, but the part above it, prohibiting law enforcement from racial profiling and creating a cause of action for declaratory or injunctive relief, would be different, and that'd be relatively new. So I actually kind of like what a lot of what the Democrats want to do. Ban no-knock warrants in drug cases. I
can't think of any real justification for no-knock warrants in drug cases. Like,
well, that was the hilarious thing and they're mostly used in drug cases. Like I was talking before, and somebody's like, "What if they have a serial killer?" And I'm like, "They don't give a."
That's fine. That's okay.
Well, here's the thing. I had to point out to them, like, well, what if they need to catch a serial killer? I'm like, first off, they don't use no-knock warrants against serial killers. They use them against drug dealers.
Yeah, like, that's not how... This person must have a very flawed understanding of how we do things.
No, that one was more along the lines of, I think it was more like a back and forth thing. And then actually, they were for all the reforms. They were like, oh, well, why do you need to get rid of it for that one thing? And I'm like, why do you want to ban them entirely? And I'm like, because you use them in like 1.1% of cases. Like, it's not even 1%. Like, how many cases are serial killers of all murderers?
Well, like, I would argue that if you knew that a serial killer was, like, in a building, you could justify doing it. Like, you could just do it. Like, there are exceptions to the Fourth Amendment. You don't need a no-knock warrant to go after a serial killer in a known place. So it really wouldn't matter.
What if it's their own house? Then you would get a warrant, though, and you just sit outside.
I'm willing to bet that there's the exigency exception would apply. I'm very certain.
I'm sure
you could get away with it. Like I am a Fourth Amendment guy at heart. I truly am. It is my favorite amendment. And I'm like, all right, that one, yeah, that'll probably fly. That's probably okay.
Well, and the worst case scenario is you say, unless you know they have somebody, in which case you do have exigent circumstance.
Yeah, like that's the thing. It's like if you have it on good authority that like they're there with a victim, well, you don't need a fucking warrant. You just go do it. And if they don't, well then like just go get a stupid warrant. It's gonna take you like 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's the thing, is also getting a warrant's really not that hard. Yeah, but we're not even talking about warrants. We're talking about no-knock warrants, which, like, okay, I knocked on the door. What's he gonna do? Run away?
Maybe.
Got 30. Like, I have to. Our police.
Yeah, like surround the fucking place.
Yeah.
Idiot. Like,
and again, like, also serial killers are not the high-end like the amount of like the arrests.
Oh no, there's very few arrests for that.
The other thing that they do is training on racial bias and duty to intervene. That's another one that the Republicans did. Ban on chokeholds. Like I said, they Republicans do a little bit. Again, they try to incentivize banning chokeholds and cardiac. This one also focuses on it says carotid holds. I'm guessing they meant like ones that cut off the artery.
That would be my assumption.
Police exercising absolute care with Everyone Act, Peace Act. The bill would change the use of force standard for federal officers from reasonableness to...
Can I just rant about something really quick?
Sure.
What is it with fucking American lawmakers and all their bills having to have like an acronym that means something?
Oh, dude.
I fucking hate that. You have no idea.
Well, dude, it's half the acts are written like how many Patriot Acts or Americans for Freedom Act or Americans Love God Act or Americans Love the Fuck Act. Like, there's so many different. All the acts are named the exact same way, and then like you're right, there's always an acronym too.
I just love how like they're very like It's like, oh, you have this acronym, and like, oh, you really like people like they're trying to squeeze the words, and then they probably have to rewrite the bill name a couple of times to make the acronym work. And like, there was definitely some poor congressional staffer who had to sit in a fucking office and try to figure out an acronym for this stupid bill. I'm like, I don't give a fuck about your stupid acronyms. Just pass the damn bill.
Well, you know what it is they're doing it so that people it becomes more palatable, and you could post it like in newspapers, and it's like, we're trying to pass the Peace Act, and that's the Peace Act is so we can go
Like, but that
ahead
doesn't
with
tell
it.
me anything.
I know, but like it makes for good TV. I don't know, like maybe.
Like, you could take the word peace as an acronym and then like use it for like a bill that like allows murder. I'm sure I could come up with an acronym.
I mean, literally, the Patriot Act is basically that, like the Patriot, not that, but it's like that same concept.
I
It's
don't
like
think the
it's the most
Patriot Act allows murder.
No, it's like the most unpatriotic bill you could probably have, but it's called the Patriot Act. So,
Yeah,
oh, it must be all pro-American and freedom, yo.
not really. But yes, I just had to mention I hate fucking acronyms on bills. I do. Stop it. It's not necessary. It's a waste of time.
They also have the Stop Militarization Law Enforcement Act, which this one I think is good, and this was not included in the Republican bill, which is
Well, no shit.
limit the use of the transfer of military-grade equipment to state and local law enforcement, which I think is important. And then again, they do more about the body cameras. They require federal uniformed police officers to wear body cameras and marked police vehicles. Problem is the federal cops are not usually the ones who are putting their knees on the back of somebody's head.
No, like they're usually better trained and just better.
Just better.
Like they're not really the ones that have the problem.
And then the Police Camera Act would require state and local law enforcement to use existing federal funds to ensure use of police body cameras. Again, a very similar thing to what the Republicans are doing. And then, again, they include a federal crime to conspire to violate existing hate crime laws for the Lynching Act. So, I think that there's nothing in the Democrats' bill that is idiotic. There's nothing in there that is over the top. I think a lot of it needs to be done. It's what everybody's asking for. If you ask people about getting rid of qualified immunity, it's like it has a ridiculously high approval rate for people who are not cops.
Yeah, like that's kind of like the one. That's like the one group that doesn't want that to happen.
Which, yeah, I mean,
like,
obviously,
well, no shit,
like,
right? Like, if I were a cop, I would want qualified immunity too.
Weird that lawyers don't get qualified immunity.
Yeah, but it's actually pretty hard to get. Well, okay, I shouldn't say that. It depends on what you do.
Yeah. If you do malpractice,
it's pretty hard, unless you like steal money. That's like the one thing that they'll get you for every time.
For what? Oh, getting disbarred?
Yeah, for stealing money. It's like the one thing.
But that's not malpractice. Like, you could still sue lawyers.
Oh yeah. Well, we talked a bit about malpractice last time with that one case, like how like it's kind of hard to fuck up in like a criminal defense matter.
Yeah, that's why criminal lawyers have such low malpractices. Foreclosure and med mal, very high.
I know like anything with real estate's typically got a much higher incidence of
well, foreclosure especially because there is you're talking about an immediacy thing.
Yeah, I can see that.
And these are, usually big assets of like, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, like a small mistake could really destroy everything.
And again, foreclosure, it's relatively immediately noticeable. Like within, like, because when you're doing a foreclosure, it's either you fucked up on the proceeding or you fucked up in, some other, on the paperwork of it. So then you have to redo it or you miss out on it. So. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think the Republicans' bill does enough. And like you said before, I know people are like, well, you need to get somewhere, you need something. But like, if you're not necessarily at least addressing one, I feel like qualified immunity, like I don't get why Republicans are so much defensive of that.
Because police unions probably donate a lot to their reelection campaigns.
They also donate to Democrats too.
This is true, but that might change in the near future. I don't know.
Thank you for tuning in. You can follow the podcast at punklaw101 on Instagram. You can follow me at BROJO, Death is in the End of Life, Punch like a delicious drink. That's right, that's Brojo Death Punch. And you can follow that on all platforms. And you can check out the Facebook page. And thank you. Thanks for tuning in. The next episode, we'll probably be talking about a bunch of the Supreme Court cases that are coming down. I know about 5 of them actually got released this week, so that'll be next week's episode. We'll be addressing all 5 of those cases in some form or fashion. And thank you. Have a nice day.